Looking to maximize your golfing potential? Learn how from one of the world's best golf instructors. Join today at WDGLC.com.
Hey there, everybody on the website. It's Wayne Defrancesco, and hopefully you have joined the club site and you're a member, and you're going to get this right away. If not, check it out. Good stuff. Good stuff. Now, why are you looking at a video of Walter Hagen? Well, this is something pretty important. I am always trying to learn more, studying the videos, trying to get my swing to be more functional, making it easier for myself, and hopefully making it easier for my students to make good golf swings and hit good shots and eventually compete, get better. I'm going to read you a list of names here, and when I'm done, I'll tell you why I read it. Walter Hagen, Gene Sarazen, Bobby Jones, Jimmy Demaret, Ben Hogan, Sam Snead, Byron Nelson, Tony Lima, Tommy Bolt, Ken Venturi, Mickey Wright, Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, Gary Player, George Knudson, Gene Littler, Johnny Miller, Lee Trevino, Raymond Floyd, Nick Price, Greg Norman, Tom Watson, Payne Stewart, Paul Azinger, Padraig Harrington, Colin Montgomery, and in more recent times, Bubba Watson, Carl Peterson, Phil Mickelson. Now, what do all these players have in common? Well, let's take a look. Here's the deal. Something you don't see a whole lot anymore. The lifted left heel. Now, sometime around 1980 something or other, the convention established by the teachers of the day was that it's not really a good idea to lift your left heel up because it would be better to keep it down. Why? I don't know. You tell me. That list I just read you is a list of all the players that I have in my model swings, and I have those players in my model swings because they're all great players, and I would say the vast majority of them are major champions. All lifted their left heel to some degree in the backswing and then put it down and hit the ball. So let's talk about this for a second. Who decided that it was a bad idea to do that? Couldn't tell you. Especially when you have Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, and Gary Player, and as you go forward, Tom Watson, Payne Stewart, all lifting it up. But somewhere along the line, it became taboo to lift your left heel up. Well, I'm going to go against convention here, and I'm going to say I would think it would be a much, much better idea, both physically and athletically, and by physically I mean stress-wise. Athletically, I mean to try to make the swing feel like something more natural in the movement of the swing as opposed to something restrictive. Let's lift that left heel up again. So let's talk about how this works. Obviously Walter Hagen, now he's got his heel up pretty good here, and you'll see it as it hits the ground. The club is still up here, and that's one of the big keys here. The heel can't meander, it can't stay up there all day. It has to hit the ground, and when it hits the ground, it has to hit the ground in a certain way so the left leg is moving out of the way. Now, let's take a look at one of my favorite swings, obviously, Ben Hogan.
Need help with your swing? Get an online lesson from Wayne at WDGLC.com.
Here's an older swing of Hogan. And obviously you'll see, again, here goes the left heel up and then back down. Now, something very interesting in Hogan's swing. When his heel went back to the ground, it came down in a different spot And the interesting thing is that when it hits the ground, the foot actually ends up straighter ahead than it was at address. Show you. So here's one where it stays pretty neutral. And when in Hogan's book, he said that he only lifted it a little bit. But you'll see here it comes up about an inch. No, I'm right. So let's take a look. So let's say the foot is angled here. Just drawing it on the center point of the foot. Now, there it goes up. So the heel has been driven in. There goes the left knee that way. Hogan took pains in his book to make sure that the weight was staying on the inside of the right foot and the right leg was staying in its angle. Now watch the foot hit the ground and come down. And what you'll see there is that the foot is slightly more straight ahead. So the drive forward from the right foot and the right leg, as the heel plants itself down, the left knee will take a rounded arc and then cut back, and thus the heel is pushed forward a little bit and actually ends up in front of the spot that it started in. So it doesn't actually come down exactly in the same place that it went up. Here's another picture here. So you see the definite inward movement of the heel as it lifts. See the hips continue to rotate. Now, Hogan definitely had right load in his swing, and we talked about that generally. So his hips will take a little bit of an arc back, and then as that right leg really moves, look at that right thigh go. When that heel hits the ground, that foot is now this way as opposed to where it started, where it was more like that. So what does that do for a golf swing? Well, it does a couple things. One very important thing that I see in amateurs, I mean, normal people, not super talented tour pros, is that if the heel comes up, the motion is more like walking. It's freer. The brace point is inside this right foot, and I'm a big fan of maintaining right knee flex, although not 100% of it, and definitely the hip is moving backwards, meaning that you're gaining depth in the right hip. Here the left knee is allowed to come in a bit, so you can see the left knee break in. Now the sequence is going to be right leg drive off the ground, and this is something that Hogan bypassed a bit in his book. He called it more of a hip movement from up higher up. I see it more as a ground movement that moves up into the hips, and that when the right leg is driving, it's driving either, you can either say it's parallel from that deeper position, or you could even say it's back more to the left. The left heel is going to plant immediately, and Hogan divided up, I'll read it to you from the book. He divides up the jobs of the right and left leg. He says the right leg is for the pushing of the lateral movement, and the left side is for the rotation or the spin. He says the turning of the hips is activated by several sets of muscles which work together. The contracted muscles of the left hip and the muscles along the inside of the left thigh start to spin the left hip around to the left. At one and the same time, the muscles of the right hip and the muscles of the right thigh, both the inside and the powerful outside thigh muscles, start to move the right hip forward. So think about that. Right hip forward, left hip around. Now if your left foot is jammed down on the ground, it's more difficult to get the left leg to get that feeling of moving back away than it is if the heel is up a little bit. So we got two things going on here. We're able to keep the hips and the knees more level, meaning that if the foot's on the ground, the tendency for most players that I see is to get the left knee to drop down and the hips to unlevel like this in the turn, and then in the forward swing getting stuck on that left knee and left foot and retarding the rotation is a big headache. So if we look at Hogan from behind, and you've seen this picture a lot, so here's where I see the deepening of the right hip, the symmetrical movement in the knees. So you can see that the whole right thigh here has moved back this way. The left has broken in. So the way I'm feeling it is I'm trying to gain depth here, but I'm trying to keep my knee bent somewhat. You can see it. I think it's pretty much retained 100% of its flex, but I don't think you have to do that. The knee movement is fairly symmetrical. Now, watch the front of the left leg. Rather than having this stay out here and round off, when he plants that heel, he's going to retract that thing right away. See that? That's a big move. Now this is what I don't see over and over again in my own swing and with a lot of the players that I teach. Now remember, Hogan had a huge lateral movement. Where is that coming from? Well, that's coming from the ground on the right leg, driving. And again, if you're this deep, you could drive this thing parallel. Or you could get a sense that the direction of the left leg would coincide with the right. You can go either way with that thought. But you can see his knees barely unlevel, just a fraction, which is pretty much physically impossible to keep them level. And now the left leg is retracting and the right leg continues to drive. Now, in through the ball, as you're hitting it, the muscles in each side of the butt here and the upper part of the legs are trying to connect and squeeze together and drive left and up like that. So we go from Hogan, and let's take a look at the best player that ever walked the planet, Big Jack. Now let's watch his foot movement here. Now again, here's the angle of the foot. Now this is really important to note, because you don't want the left heel landing further away from the target. Now watch this. The thing is up and in. Now watch when it goes back down. Look where that foot is. See that? Why is that? That's because the right leg is driving. Look at that thrust off the right. Now I can guarantee you that he's not losing any ground there. That foot's not bouncing out there at all. Look at that thigh move. When you get those legs moving out from under you like that, it's much easier to sequence the swing, keep the head still, and drive the thing out. So why don't we see this anymore today? Well, I think it's a mistake not to do it. Now, if you look at Nicklaus's heel, would you say perhaps that that's too high up there and too much left leg movement? I don't know. I think you'll have to try it out. I get a sense that if I can get my heel to come in and lift about an inch, that I have something to put on the ground in a sequential and directional fashion that will help me And when I leave it on the ground, my hips definitely feel more stressed. And the stress that I can take, any stress I can take out of my hip movement with my back is going to be really good for me. So let's check Arnie. See what we get here. Again, golf was, at that point, these motions are less restrictive. Now, theoretically, you take an amateur and say, okay, well, if there's more movement, right, then maybe they're not going to be able to make it precise enough and get it to the ball. I'm really beginning to think the opposite is true. The more you restrict someone that doesn't have the physical gifts that these guys have, the more wooden it feels, the more forced it feels, the more stressed it feels, tense, not free, not able to move. I think the idea is to free it up, maintain your brace. Now, there's certain things that you have to do if you're going to move around like this, and one of them is to maintain the right leg angle, some of the right knee flex, and when you put that, you have to learn how to put that foot back down. And all these guys, when they put the foot back down, the heel does not spin in because of the lateral drive. It sets down and the foot ends up straighter ahead. So there you have it. Another new little wrinkle, little tidbit from Wayne D. Let's get that heel to come off the ground a little bit. Learn how to put it down. I think your swing is going to feel a lot more athletic and a lot more natural.